What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. We've got a big, fat, packed show for you here today. Justin Boone joins us for the usual, the People's Panic Meter, the waiver wire additions he's making this week, and also a bunch of NFL news that hit us here on Monday. But before we get to all of that and all of those absolutely electric topics, we've got to talk Monday Night Football, which we did get an electric performance from one of the teams here that participated in this game. Cowboys 33, Raiders 16. The only thing that was sicker than the sound of my voice right now was George Pickens' performance in this game, and CeeDee Lamb too, which, by the way, game started pretty weird. On that note, these two guys did not go out for the first series, as I am taping this recap here at 11:22 p.m. Eastern. We still do not know. Maybe by the time you guys are listening to this or watching it on Tuesday, you might know the answer to this right now. But as of the time that I am recording this, we still don't know what the deal was. But it was reported by the Monday Night Football broadcast that the Cowboys, via a coaching decision, had not thrown CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens out there for the first series. Those guys were assumingly benched on that first series for, again, reasons I don't know as of the time of this recording. Of course, the Cowboys go 3-and-out with the wide receiver trio of Cavante Turpin, Ryan Flournoy, who did score a touchdown later in this game. Didn't get a tweet from Nate about that tonight, but obviously did get a message from producer Colin. So the Floor Boys are thriving. And Jalen Tolbert as well. They go 3-and-out on that series. That was the last time the Cowboys offense looked out of sorts because they simply dominated the rest of this game. George Pickens, 9 catches, 144 yards on a team high 11 targets, also scored a great catch and run touchdown. Pickens was unbelievable after the catch in this game, and I'm glad we're showing the route chart here for George Pickens from Next Gen Stats. There's so much here to like. These shallow crossers, these in-breakers here, the deeper in-breakers as well, especially that one 15-yard catch, just a little over 15 yards. That was a dig, an in-breaker there. This is new stuff for George Pickens, man, and it's been so fun to see because let's go on the journey for George Pickens here in terms of his NFL career, because coming into the league, his first season, I thought he really struggled to separate, especially against zone coverage, but he was also kind of running this stripped down, stupid route tree in Matt Canada's high school offense, very static X receiver stuff, a lot of curls, goes, outbreakers, corners, really low percentage stuff. Like the way that only the bozo coaches are using their number one X receivers. Like that was what George Pickens was doing as a rookie. And I think he struggled to consistently win and separate in that season as a rookie. He was also coming off a torn ACL from his college days. And again, just didn't play. He was fine. He was good against press, solid against man, but not a consistent separator across the board. And I maintain that this guy has gotten better and better and better every single season in the NFL, to the point that his final year in Pittsburgh, I thought, was clearly a breakthrough season where he really stepped it up on some of those routes that we're looking at there. The slants, the quick hitters against press man coverage as that isolated X receiver. We didn't see those clubs in his bag in his first 2 seasons. His third year, we did see that step forward. And now, here his 4th season in the NFL with Dallas, now we're seeing a lot more of these intermediate in-breakers, where that has been a big step forward for him this year. Adding that to his bag of tricks has been huge. And that's what we're talking about as like a, number 1B type of receiver, whatever you want to say. That's what Pickens is operating at that level right now. And man, I'm so happy to see Pickens having the season. I was really in on Pickens this year. He was my one player I don't want to leave any draft without. In my draft day blueprint article, talked about him a ton on the show. I just think he was one of the most mispriced players in fantasy football this offseason. And when you're looking at the targets, as we're showing on the screen here from Jacob Gibbs right now, since CeeDee Lamb got back, Lamb has 37 targets, Pickens has 35. Receptions, Pickens 26, Lamb 24, Pickens 383 receiving yards, CeeDee Lamb 335. Lamb's going to have some big days. He could have had an even bigger one in this one if he caught that A little bit of a short pass from Dak Prescott, but he gets both hands on it. You wish he would have corralled that in on fourth down and walked into the end zone. He's going to have his big days. He had a fine game tonight, 66 yards and a touchdown. But, man, George Pickens is just on fire right now. I hope you guys, which we said on the show, I hope you guys did not sell high when CeeDee Lamb was coming back, because there is more than enough room for both of these guys to eat in this passing offense. Again, obviously, it's a great matchup against those Raiders DBs. I understand that. It's not a good room on the back end there. That Raiders defense certainly has its problems, but what you want a number one level receiver to do, and I think that's the level that George Pickens is playing at. He's obviously, Lamb is still their top guy. He's still the number one on the team, but Pickens is playing as that quintessential 1B type, the Devontae Smiths, the T. Higgins, the Jalen Waddles, all those guys, by the way, except T. Higgins, are kind of pushing for that number one spot. And I think Pickens in that isolated X receiver role, very different than CeeDee Lamb, but he is playing at that level this year. Just a truly ascendant player that I'm hoping stays in Dallas from a dynasty perspective. I've kind of been hesitant to ratchet him up my dynasty rankings just because I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with him. But I'm telling you what, if he signs with the Dallas Cowboys, he's probably going to go into like the top 17, maybe top 16 players in terms of wide receivers in my dynasty rankings. That's how well I think he's playing. That's how awesome I think this situation is, and the stability and room for potential improvement for this situation too, from a fantasy standpoint. Again, shout out to George Pickens, breakthrough season here for him. It was great to see it on display tonight. Just that layer that he has added into his game this year, mostly because he's playing in this offense versus some of the other ones that he used to play in, especially the Matt Canada high school offense. But those digs, the deeper in-breaking routes, against man coverage, against zone coverage, we're seeing more of a full field receiver here from George Pickens this year, and it's been really, really awesome to watch. One of the best wide receiver picks you could make. But again, the wealth was spread around tonight from Dak Prescott. 4 touchdowns here, 1 to Pickens, 1 to Lamb. Could have had 2. Ryan Flournoy, like I mentioned, got 1, and Jake Ferguson got on the map here too. Just 4 catches for 16 yards, but he did get a wide open touchdown. If you started him in fantasy, you got to feel pretty good about that. Javonte Williams sets a season high with 22 carries in this one. No monster runs, no touchdown, a long run of 16 yards, but just slow, steady tempo runs, 93 yards on the ground. He also caught 1 pass on 1 target for 0 yards, did Javonte Williams. So did a lot of damage on the ground in this game. I really like this Cowboys offense, man. We'll see if they can make a playoff push. I don't think the odds are necessarily in their favor, but the offense is really good. It's fun to watch. It's a little bit boring to talk about from a fantasy football perspective when we're previewing it, because what are we going to say? You start all these guys every single week and you feel pretty damn good about it. The new thing we can talk about with this Dallas team is that I do think the defense, and look, it's the Raiders, and that Raiders team is just completely objectionable. It's just abhorrent in a variety of different ways. But we can throw that PFF stat back up here on the screen for a second, because I think it really shows a lot of the ways that this team felt a little bit different. 55.1% pass rush win rate, according to Pro Football Focus. 6 forced incompletions, 4 sacks, and an interception. A tipped pass that Geno Smith kind of threw right at the defender there in Dallas. Brock Bowers gets lit up afterwards, and then the ball goes to a Cowboys defender there. It was Bell who ended up with the interception on that one. I think after Murray was the player who tipped it, but yeah, it felt like a different team. Quinnen Williams immediately making an impact here with 1.5 sacks. The Cowboys pressured Geno Smith on 16 of 49 dropbacks, according to ESPN research. Todd Archer showing that on the screen. It was a true team effort as 9 different players recorded at least 1 pressure. Quinnen Williams and Osa Odigizua led the way with 3 pressures apiece. Yeah, it felt like that. Cowboys were dominant at the line of scrimmage tonight. And again, I understand the opponent. We'll touch on the Raiders here in just a second, but this is something that I think we at least maybe need to investigate going forward, if this Cowboys team is going to be the complete pushover, the complete sieve that it's been on defense over the course of the year. Like I said, the Raiders, not that much of a test, okay? They stink. But they do get the Eagles and Chiefs and Lions the next 3 weeks. So we're certainly going to put this to the test here going forward. Like, is this defense different now that Quinnen Williams is in the mix? Because Quinnen Williams is awesome. I thought it was kind of crazy, the negative reaction that this trade got. I get it's a first round pick, whatever. It's not this year's first round pick. It's the first round pick in 2027. And Quinnen Williams is really, really good. Like, he's one of the best interior defensive players in the NFL. You might have to give him a big contract extension. Who cares? Pay good players, period. And the Cowboys didn't have a lot of good players. They got one now. I loved how Quinnen Williams played in this game. He's one of my favorite interior defensive players to watch. I interviewed him before the draft that year that he was drafted, and I just thought he was such an awesome guy. Brings a ton of energy. Love the way he approaches football, and I think he's going to be somebody that changes the fortunes of this Cowboys defense. So, again, that's the last note on the Cowboys. Final thing to say on them, it just has to be mentioned what an awesome performance this was in the wake of obviously a tragedy that this team went through last year. Marshawn Nealon, of course, it hanging over all of this. Just really cool for these guys to come out here and dominate in all phases. They lost a teammate last week in a really horrible fashion. Obviously, everybody knows the story at this point. So just cool to see that team come out there and put it all on the field and dominate, like I mentioned, in all three phases. This one just was not particularly close from very, very early on in the football game, which, to transition us to the Raiders, I think does just, look, we talked about the Raiders somehow last week on a primetime recap, and a lot of my thoughts just remain the same. I think this is one of the most poorly built teams in the NFL. The Raiders start the season 2-8 for a second straight year. Only other times they were 2-8 or worse in back-to-back seasons, 2006, 2008, 1961, and 1962. That one comes in from Josh DeBow of the Associated Press. Yeah, like I said, this Raiders team, it's so poorly constructed. I don't get it, especially on the offensive side of the football. They outright refused to run the football all night long. Ashton Jeanty finishes with 6 carries for 7 yards, 1.2 yards per attempt. But you know when they did try to run the ball? When they were at their own 1-yard line after the Cowboys turned it over on downs inside their scoring area, inside the 10-yard line, I believe. And then they took a penalty to get down to the 1. And then guess what happens? The offensive line gets obliterated. Ashton Jeanty doesn't get his momentum out of the end zone, and they take a damn safety. That's when you decide, after all night, Geno Smith, 42 passes in this game, that's when you decide to run the ball? What are we doing here? Like, truly, what is this offense? It's so bizarre to me. And I come out of this one, and look, we could talk about the receiver usage, which, of course, the receiver usage has just been absolutely mind-numbing for this team all season long. I don't even know I don't know what the deal with Jack Besh is. Who knows? 7 routes in this game. He caught his one target of the night for a 19-yard catch and run play there. So that was great. That was amazing. Okay, this tweet, I'm glad we brought this up from Carter Donick. We'll get back to the wide receivers in just a second. I truly forgot about this, but Carter mentions that trading a late third for Geno Smith is somehow not even the worst Raiders quarterback move of the offseason. We all forgot about the panic trade of a 5th-round pick for Kenny Pickett a week before the season just because Aiden O'Connell got hurt and they wanted a clipboard holder who's been there and done that. Yeah, a 5th-round pick for how did 2 teams trade a 5th-round pick for Kenny Pickett this offseason? Couldn't make the damn Browns roster, so the Raiders traded a 5th for him. Again, just so many weird, mind-numbing moves by this Raiders team. So back to the wide receivers. The update is not that there's not much of an update here. Again, Jack Besh, 7 routes, catches his 1 pass for 19 yards, catch and run play there off a boot. But of course, the as I joked on Twitter, the best thing to do after that, don't play him again the entire night. So he plays 9 snaps, 7 routes. Dante Thornton, their 4th-round X receiver, completely sacrificial, 0 targets on his routes tonight. Absolutely incredible stuff. Tyler Lockett, 3 for 33. Michael Mayer, 28 routes. Ashton Jeanty, 30 routes. He had a drop in this one that was not great. His receiving usage is maybe making him less than a complete nightmare in fantasy, although I still think it's been a pretty horrible season for him. And then Trey Tucker and Brock Bowers run the most routes. Bowers tonight, according to Nathan Junkie of Pro Football Focus, played 96.7% of the snaps. Previous season high was 83%. He played 48% of his snaps in the slot, 22.4% out wide. Season averages before that were 42 and 18%. So more snaps in the slot, more snaps out wide. And that kind of is the last thing I want to say about this Raiders team. You know, they were clearly playing in a lot of 13 personnel tonight. You know, and 13 personnel, right? Like it's the big talking point of the year. All these teams, like, look at the Rams, what they're doing out of 13 personnel. It's incredible stuff. They're unbelievable. From their 13 personnel looks. Well, this Raiders team out of 13 personnel tonight, -5 rushing yards out of 13 personnel. There was not minus 0.26 EPA in their 13 personnel packages. Among teams that actually ran 13 personnel, that was 10th of the 13 teams that ran 13 personnel this week. So, I think a lot of that is because they're splitting the tight ends out when they're in 13. And it's not in these ways where, I mean, the Rams, they're so beautifully put together, these moments where Terrence Ferguson is ripping these vertical routes where it's clearing space for everybody out. Brock Bowers is kind of like the isolated receiver split out over there. And I love Brock Bowers, but let's be serious for a second. He might be the freakiest tight end in the league or the best tight end in the league. He's still a tight end. Like, he's getting locked up by Deron Bland at times. Marvin Harrison Jr. took Deron Bland, you know, he took his lunch, he took his soul a couple of weeks ago. And there are moments where Deron Bland is like step for step with Brock Bowers, because then you're losing matchups in that way. I just think Chip Kelly completely is out of his depth on this one. I'm going to do more investigative work on this 13 personnel and some of the Raiders, like multiple tight end sets, but it's some of the worst stuff that they do on offense, despite the fact that they have a lot of talent at that tight end position. Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, I think, can play a little bit. Ian Thomas is a good blocking tight end. So I'm going to look into that a little bit more, probably talk about it with Nate tomorrow on Football 301. But yeah, the fantasy takeaway here is that I think Bowers on this team that right now, if the NFL draft happened today, they would pick 6th. My God, there's a lot of bad teams in the NFL. This Raiders team is picking 6th right now. The fantasy takeaway here is that Bowers, you know, 7 for 72. You're going to love that if you started him at tight end, but there could just be so much more if the offensive line for this team wasn't a complete joke and they weren't one of the worst coached teams in the NFL. There was another weird situation tonight with the Raiders where Jordan Meredith, who had been starting at center, even though he is a natural guard, and they moved last year's center Jackson Powers Johnson to guard. JPJ out now, he's on IR, and then they moved Meredith back to center. Like, again, I could go on and on about the weird things that this Raiders team is doing and how it makes no sense with their personnel usage, but alas, nobody wants to hear that.